Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And it's time for another dose of dismal Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, get ready, because Neon's in a mood.
Oh my god, I'm so tired of this. I don't know if I can yell about it today.
You might need to get a flame warning for you.
For me.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen very often. Yours is more like a nuclear cloud.
I am.
Because for me, it's a common occurrence. It's like, whatever, Geeky's yelling again. You know, the water is wet. You know, the sky is blue. But then you go off and it's like, holy shit. So,
then there's radiation poisoning for years
That's
afterwards.
right.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this because this is the latest example of people calling D&D racist. And, you know, unfortunately, it seems like Wizards of the Coast is listening to these idiots because they are pulling the teeth out of this game. I mean, you know, we saw several examples in the last couple of years of D&D becoming less of a traditional RPG with fighting elements and more shipping, more coffee shop simulation.
Because when I play Dungeons and Dragons, I want to go to the coffee shop or go to college prom. Yeah,
and it's absolutely ridiculous. A lot of old school players are, you know, moving over to other gaming systems. Wizards of the Coast, you know, seems to care more about virtue signaling to the Tumblr crowd than selling to old school fans. And that's fine. I mean, you know, financially, D&D did very well during the pandemic. Now we're seeing a lot of brands that did well during the pandemic not do so well now. I'm looking at Peloton, looking at Instacart, and I have to wonder, people are like, yeah, I played D&D when I was in lockdown, but now I can actually go outside.
Then we see things like Critical Role that kind of started all these people on the D&D kick. Yeah. And now they're in trouble because they're not inclusive enough.
Oh yeah,
over ridiculous things.
Critical Role getting blasted for being too white, for cultural appropriation.
Right.
Like when you court this audience, it's never enough. And we're going to see,
basically because they want to see themselves. They want to be the hosts.
So now we've got this guy who is a white male. By the way, a white male, that the North American Simulation Gaming Association author claims D&D promotes race essentialism because humans cannot realistically imagine a completely disconnected reality.
You mean Twitter can't imagine it?
Twitter can't imagine it. And this guy's looking, I think, to get score some points with academia, and that's what D&D has become. I mean, geez, when Squid King was playing D&D with his school group, you weren't allowed to kill the monsters.
No.
You depleted their hit points, but you weren't allowed to actually fight and kill them because, you know, we can't have that at school. We can't have violence at school.
Was there prom?
I don't think they had prom.
Not
Monster
yet.
Prom.
Hadn't been Monster Prom yet. Okay.
Yeah, Monster Prom. That's a game, actually. There's a Monster Prom game. And people have been asking us to play it because I guess it's pretty cringy. It's like Monster High. But
why would you want me to suffer like that?
For views? Anyway, we're going to talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture, news, views, and rants. Guys, over 261, almost 262.
Yay!
262,000 subs. We do talk about tabletop gaming occasionally. We've been talking about the rapid decline of Dungeons and Dragons. This is something I had not been paying attention to because I hadn't played D&D for a number of years, and I wanted to teach kids how to play D&D, and I'm like, what the hell happened to tabletop?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, they can go ahead and make some of these other things to try to appeal to a different audience. And that would be okay, except for the fact that it seems like they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the special things that would be for the other audience. Yeah. And they're basically labeling anybody who likes the old games or the old way as a problematic person. And if they could do both and not, you know, shame either group, but here they sit.
No, this is how it works. And we've talked about this with so many other established brands. It's about which brand, which IP has the biggest audience, has the biggest megaphone, and D&D...
biggest megaphone, not necessarily the biggest audience.
Yeah, but, you know, D&D is synonymous with tabletop. So if you're gonna, you know, vandalize something, if you're gonna take it over, you're gonna go for D&D because everybody knows D&D.
See, that to me, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But I'm just like, I don't understand why they can't be additive, why it has to be subtractive. That's what I don't understand. Like, if I have a burger restaurant and I want to add chicken sandwiches for people who like chicken sandwiches, that's an additive thing so I can appeal to more people. I'm not going to say that people who want to come in for a chicken sandwich, now burgers aren't sold because burgers are problematic. You know what I mean? It's like, well, everything has to be chicken now because
chicken's homophobic.
The chicken people want everything chicken. You know, I just, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, why can't you be additive? Why can't you do both in a way that's open and, you know, accepting to everyone?
Because you're missing the point. The point of all of this is
I'm aware of the point.
Is to take something that people love that has a huge built-in fan base and just scribble all over it to make sure
it's mine now. I licked it. It's mine.
Yeah, I licked it. It's mine. We licked Star Wars. We're
She-Ra.
Yeah, She-Ra likes to be licked now.
We're licking Halo.
Licking Halo. We're licking Tolkien. And that's where I think a lot of this crosses over because, you know, again, D&D was kind of the original D&D was kind of the unofficial Tolkien tabletop game because, you know, the dwarves and the elves and the halflings were all very, very close to Tolkien's version. And, you know, so now it's like, it's all this stuff is starting to bleed into.
Let's be honest. The reason most people know what these are is because of D&D. Like, you know, a lot of people like Tolkien, but, you know, Tolkien wasn't that popular, to be fair. I mean, when D&D came about.
To the general, to the general
audiences. Where D&D made these characters like, you know, everyday commonplace type characters.
They became tropes, you know.
Right. Exactly.
This is what an elf is. Oh, an elf has pointy ears, a bow and arrow, and can use magic. And
they made it more accessible to people.
Yeah. So, you know, to understand what's going on here, you know, they're basically this whole thing of like, your race determines your abilities, right?
Which makes sense when you're trying to play a game and you want to put limits on characters.
Yeah, and historically in D&D, now they've tried to walk some of that back with some new, you know, rules adjustments. But historically in D&D, certain races had definite advantages over others. I'm sorry, if you're playing as an orc or you're playing as like an ogre or some, you know, demi-human that's got physically has a lot more strength than, you know, say a 5'2" human woman, you're going to get bonuses for that sort of thing. Well, that's problematic now. And I think that the bigger issue is probably they're afraid that this is going to turn into a discussion about, you know, trans rights.
I was going to say, is that what they're going to try to argue?
I'm going to say that's because they're basically saying, oh, okay, well, if orcs are naturally, well, they're saying that orcs are standing for black people, which I'm sorry.
Which that was more about your racism than the racism.
Yeah, if that's what you see, that you think that black people are monsters, fictional monsters, that's on you. That is on you. But saying that, like, okay, they're naturally aggressive, they're whatever. They were meant to be fodder, to be killed. Again, they were based off of Tolkien's orcs, which were the bad guys, you know. And
which I want to point out were once elves.
They're corrupted elves.
So
D&D is basically a bunch of orc. It's the orc game now because it's a corrupted version of what used to be. Okay. I mean, they're even going back to Gary Gygax, and they're throwing shade at the late, great Gary Gygax, who created the game. And they're doing everything they can do to disparage him and disparage his legacy and distance themselves.
While they take it. Just like J.K. Rowling. Same thing. Like, this is how these people operate. They find something, they latch onto it, it's got an audience, and that becomes theirs. And then they not only kick out the original fans, right? They push them out, but then they actually try to remove the creators from the creation. They appropriate, they don't create.
Yes. You know, just like they did in Mordor.
Well, I just keep thinking, I keep saying it, but like, you know, Independence Day, it's like the aliens. They come to each planet, the planet, take up all the resources, take everything, and then leave it and go on to the next. And that's basically what these people do. Yeah,
and this has been going on for a couple of years now. You know, who cares about D&D racism? We all should. D&D must grapple with racism and fantasy. No.
They're not real. They're not real people.
They're not real people. And if you see orcs as being minorities, that's on you. There's something wrong with you. You are broken. D&D and racism. Oh my. D&D tries to banish racist stereotypes. Now back. Yeah, it's so funny. With the Drow, with Drizzt, they had a costume of Drizzt at where was it? Spirit Halloween. I remember last year. And it was actually a white guy in the costume without the face paint because they didn't want to do blackface.
Right, because they get in trouble.
But they couldn't put a black guy in the costume because they'd get in trouble.
Right, so what do you do?
Well, he just looked like an elf.
So,
he looked like a dark elf.
I get that.
It was so stupid. It was like...
I love it. People going about stereotyping racist stereotypes are the same people who are like, oh my God, Snake Eyes can't be a white guy because he does Kung Fu, and so that makes him Asian.
Yeah.
And Iron Fist can't be a white guy because he does martial arts, so that makes him clearly Asian. Frosta has to be an Eskimo girl because she's got ice powers. It's the same type of people. It's okay when they stereotype the shit out of everything. You know, if you're a straight white man, you're obviously these things because we said so, as we stereotype you. But don't you dare stereotype us.
So going back to the original D&D, it used to be that the races were actually classes. Like you had humans that could have different professions, and then you had dwarves, elves, halflings, and they were all kind of their own class.
But it was just basically to set up so that people had different strengths and weaknesses so you could play the damn game.
Yes.
That's all it was.
And then as Advanced Dungeons & Dragons came out, they actually introduced that, okay, you can have a dwarven fighter or a dwarven cleric, whereas before the dwarf was just a tank.
Right.
But again, you know, dwarves technically make better fighters than they do, anything else, because that's kind of what they were built to do. They're strong characters, whatever. There are certain advantages to having certain races just because of the biology of these fictional races. They give advantages, seeing in the dark and all this other crazy stuff, whatever the race is. And now it's like, okay, all race is problematic. So all things are, so you're telling me that you could have, an orc character that should be strong, but no, the orc's not as strong as the female fighter who's like 5'2".
I'm just thinking if aliens invaded, I can't wait for these people to go up to them and tell them that they're not allowed to invade because they have some strengths we don't have, and that's racist.
Yeah, and it's going to go over as well as Mars attacks.
Yeah,
They're like, oh, welcome our space brethren. Oh, we're all here. We're all going to be equal. Yeah, whatever. Boom, you're dead. You know, whatever. You're meat now. You're meat. Everybody's meat. Some meat tastes better than other meat, by the way.
That's racist. You can't say that.
I'm just saying. Some people maybe taste better than other people, and that's just the aliens' preference.
Like, how do you know?
Because the aliens, they have a preference for some flesh tastes better than. Anyway,
you just make up shit. That's what these articles.
I'm just making shit up.
A lot of these other outlets are making up shit all the time anyway.
All right, so let's get into this. This is coming from Bounding in the Comics. According to regular North American Simulation and Gaming Association contributing author Clayton Whittle, Dungeons & Dragons promotes the concept of race essentialism, or the idea that racial identity determines the path we take in life. Well, yeah, because elves culturally and physically are more prone to magic. Dwarves are more prone to brute strength, and that's
also, dude, it isn't real.
It's not real, Clayton. It's not real. I will go tell him to his face. He's actually from Penn State. We'll probably run into him at a con sometime.
I don't know, Clayton. They're not real.
They're not real, Clayton. Because players cannot realistically imagine a completely disconnected reality.
How insulting is that? Y'all are too dumb to effing realize they aren't real. Because you can't imagine other things that don't relate to you. So, because people are just inherently stupid. Unlike Clayton, who can see it all.
Yeah, unlike Clayton, who's the enlightened white man in the room here. You're all a bunch of Tom Hanks and Mazes and Monsters.
You're just dumbasses.
Did you remember that? Did you ever see that Mazes and Monsters?
I did, but it's been so many years ago.
It was during the Satanic Panic, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, D&D is going to warp your brain." So Tom Hanks starts playing Mazes and Monsters, not copyright infringement.
Right. I remember.
And then he actually thinks he's his character, and they have to go chase him down before he throws himself off a building or something. It's like, come on.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. Clayton is the enlightened.
The enlightened. He is.
Man.
He's enlightened.
That's what they're called, enlightened.
He's enlightened.
The enlightened. So he's here to tell us that we're all too dumb to understand that separate racial identity from imaginary characters and worlds. Says the people arguing that they're stand-ins for races.
So there you go. That goes in the Clownfish lexicon along with Istaphobe. Now it's enlightened. This is when a white person comes to you and gives you all the secret knowledge, all their hot takes on other minorities, issues, problems, whatever. They're the enlightened ones. Enlightened, just like Gandalf. He was enlightened. I was
thinking about Gandalf.
He died and he came back enlightened. They're incapable of not drawing comparisons between the game's fictional creatures.
Y'all dumbasses!
Races.
You can't draw. Yeah, she's not wrong. There are a bunch of people out there that are unable to separate it, and they're writing articles about why orcs are in stand-ins for black people.
On March 12th, the organization published a piece by Whittle headlined, Confronting Racial Essentialism in Dungeons & Dragons, whereas the Penn State University Learning, Design, and Technology Ph.D. candidate, whose work seeks to empower individual citizens, especially underrepresented populations, to act as environmental agents in their own lives by providing educational tools, engaging experiences, and a platform through which their voices can build Efficacy.
Well, I'm so glad the white guy is standing up for all the underrepresented people and telling them they're all too stupid to separate themselves from characters in the game.
He, him, Black Lives Matter, white guy. Yeah, he's enlightened. He's enlightened. It addresses how players, writers, and dungeon masters can approach and confront racial essentialism, finding ways to resist the implicit demands on character races. Oh, fuck this. Racial essentialism is as core the idea that racial identity determines the path we take in life. In the
real world, yeah, I can see that being argued.
We're talking about humans. Humans as a race are treated as one race. We're talking about fictitious monsters and near human, humans are always treated, doesn't matter what their skin color is or any of that in D&D.
Well, the problem with racial essentialism and actual, realistic settings is that people like this guy think that, people think that their race determines what they can and can't do. And it's like, but that's not always the case. I mean, there's a lot of places you go, that's like a stereotype. That's like a stereotype. Like, okay, so if you're from a ghetto area, you'll never be more than that ghetto area, depending on what race you are. That's stupid and unrealistic. I mean, it's more to do with the fact that financial and educational limitations has nothing to do with race, and it's like, you're really pushing it. I mean, I can see it argued more for in reality, but not in an imaginary game with imaginary characters.
Academics need to keep the fuck out of D&D because every time they get involved in D&D and Tolkien himself was, an academic, but every time these current year academics get involved in fantasy, it becomes a clusterfuck.
Well, they also think they're smarter than everyone else.
Yes, that is your
and they usually they're usually dumbasses, just talk a lot. What do you say? Muddy your waters to appear deep, and that's what they mostly do. Like, write 1,000-page essay that could be whittled down to 10 pages, and it's mostly bullshit.
Yeah, give me my PhD because blah, 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 racism, blah, 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 D&D, buzzword,
well,
blah,
when you're
blah.
in college, you can argue anything to get an A. I had art class, and somebody literally glued a stapler to a canvas, and because they argued about, it's representative of blah, 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 he got an A. It was literally an art piece that took him 5 minutes to do because he glued a stapler to a canvas. And he got an A for it because he could argue it. And that's what that to me sums up academia.
God. Within the game, D&D, I'm just going to jump around here because it's a very long-winded article.
Of course it is, because it's academia.
Yeah, within the game, D&D encourages assumptions based on racial essentialism. Certain races are inherently evil, and their actions always pursue goals of cruel intent because they were monsters, they were fodder, obstacles for players, which were the good guys, to defeat, to get the treasure, to win the game. The poor, misunderstood Goombas in Mario. How dare you just stomp on their heads.
Well, how's that any different than the media spinning all Russians as being evil because of choices made by Putin?
You're not allowed to say it.
I'm just saying. I mean,
you're not allowed to say it.
There are a lot of people that are protesting against it in Russia.
Yes.
But that would be like, saying everyone in Russia, you know what I mean? I don't know. That's not really race. I guess it's country. But still, I'm like...
Players are trained from the start to expect evil intentions from goblins, barbarism from orcs, or kindness from elves. Well, no, there have been some twists on that, but just generally speaking, it's known in these fantasy worlds that orcs are bastards. Elves are kind of shifty, but they're mostly benign, and goblins are bad. These are fodder to kill, to get XP, to get through the dungeon, get through the quest, to get the treasure, to win the game, to have fun, and not overthink this shit. Because at the end of the day, it's all make-believe, and at the end of the day, if you don't like the way that these races are portrayed, your DM can change it.
But my next question is, who's the bad guy then?
This guy.
Well, I mean, I'm just like, if every race is supposed to be inherently good and not evil, what are you fighting then?
You're fighting racism. So doesn't that sound fun? That's basically what D&D has become. It's become a dating sim,
coffee shop sim,
where you fight racism and racial injustice. That is what you get together once or twice a week to play. This is like everything else. Every form of escapism, it's become. They overthink it. They add subtext to it that was never intended to be there. They strip out all the fun and they turn everything into edutainment, whether it's comics or movies or video games or tabletop. And tabletop is getting it bad now. Like tabletop, they had a foot in the door with the orc thing, which is actually years old. People brought this shit up and they got shot down. They're bringing it up again. And the whole purpose is to turn D&D, to turn tabletop into edutainment. Edutainment, which sounds really boring. Fucking fun, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And this guy's an academic, so of course he's going to be all like, let's make it.
I have no words.
Yeah. So, I mean, he goes on and he goes on. He goes on. The first binary approach is a full dedication to fantasy. In this approach, the writer and dungeon master makes explicit there is no connection to the real world.
There's no connection to the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Most writers find this to be the most difficult path to follow. You know, they can't. They make connections. Their brains make connections. God, he likes to hear himself speak. This is another, okay, so let's get to this tweet. So Chris Ferguson, who is a Stetson University psychology professor, recently published a study that claims there is no association between D&D and racism, and most people, including POC, don't find evil orcs offensive. Actually,
that's true.
At least in the circles we travel in, I can tell you that people who have been playing D&D for a very long time, they happen to be POC, were actually pretty appalled that a bunch of white people were comparing black people to orcs.
Right, because they didn't see themselves as orcs. Why would they?
They pulled an episode of Community.
Oh, because of the drow costume?
Because of the drow costume, because Dr. Ken was in. They're calling it blackface. It's like, what the fuck? They're dark, because they're dark elves. They live underground.
Right, so they pulled it.
It wasn't, God, so ridiculous. In real life, no association between D&D and racism. Most people, including POC, don't find evil orcs offensive. That is true. There's been so much pushback against this. They're like, what the hell are you doing? And yeah, this shit right here where they're like, let's not even do combat in D&D anymore. Let's just, let's just LARP.
A circus? We're going to LARP a circus.
We're going to LARP a circus, yes. Yes, this is what D&D has become, guys. This is why everybody's so pissed. It's stupid. This conversation comes up because D&D is popular now, and D&D has become more popular because of Critical Role. Again, it's not Matt Mercer's fault, but they definitely did attract the Tumblr crowd, which led to where we're at right now. And now they're actually trying to cancel Critical Role too, because you can never make these people happy.
It hurts my head. I'm just sitting here like, I don't have anything to say because I've like kind of just clouded over because I'm just like, all I hear is blah, 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 racism.
Blah, 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 racism, blah, 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 blah.
I'm just so tired of it. I'm just sitting here like,
what about, what? Every time you kill an orc, you're literally killing a minority.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Literally. Like, it's like Peter Pan.
Yeah, if you go kill orcs, if you go kill these characters in games, it just means that low-key, you want to go kill people, minorities in reality. I mean, it's just...
This is ridiculous.
My brain hurts. And I'm really trying to understand what the original guy's, what argument he's making, because the more he talks, the more his argument seems to be at the heart of it, that we shouldn't have different races in the games because people are too dumb.
Yes.
To separate them from reality.
Yes.
That's his whole argument.
Yes.
And I don't know if he's trying to argue against playing the games or for. It's very convoluted.
Well, he's enlightened, so you have to listen to him.
I'm just
he's
like,
enlightened.
That's your whole argument is based on the assumption that people are stupid.
Yes, they're not as smart as he is. He's the smartest guy in the room because he's a PhD candidate from Penn State University.
And has Black Lives Matter and pronouns in his bio.
Yes, he's enlightened.
I'm just...
We're going to wrap it up.
Okay. My head hurts.
D&D is a lost cause, guys. Like, it's not coming back from this. The only way D&D is going to come back from this is if the rumors about Hasbro selling off Wizards of the Coast.
They're not going to because it makes too much money. I think at one point they were, but then when it came back that it was making so much money because it was, and of course that was during the pandemic times. Yeah. It just, till it came through on that annual review. And then they made the guy in charge of that in charge of Hasbro, so he's not gonna get rid of his baby. So I don't buy for 1 minute they're gonna sell it.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that could save it.
Unless it dies again and then they sell it.
Well, that's what I'm thinking might happen because you look at Peloton, you look at Instacart, and they both dropped off a freaking cliff after the lockdowns ended. And it might be the same with D&D and board games. It might be like they're going to decline now because everybody was cooped up in their houses, so they're playing D&D and they're playing Monopoly and they're playing. But now it's like, oh yeah, we can get outside, so let's just go outside and do something. And then they might be like, yeah, let's sell the shit off because there's a lot of baggage with it. We'll sell it to China. We'll sell it to China and they'll strip all this shit out of it.
If you want to make games like Coffee Shop D&D and that, okay, fine.
Make a different game.
Well, no, go ahead and make that as games. but then make the other games too. There's, like I said, it's only additive. It only adds to your bottom line to be inclusive the entire way around. But they keep trying to paint original D&D as something that's terrible, Istaphobic, when it isn't, so that they can just eliminate those players.
Yeah.
And that's kind of dumb from a business standpoint, and it's kind of, you know, inclusive and diverse too. So
anyway, listen to the enlightened man at your own peril. We're gonna wrap this up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.